It's June 20th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's BIA trip to Paris. The South Korean leader has arrived in France, where he'll give a presentation touting Busan as the most suitable city to host the 2030 World Expo. He'll also sit down with his French counterpart for summit talks. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Chinese leader Xi Jinping agreed to stabilize frosty U.S.-China relations. Blinken also urged Beijing to encourage North Korea to act responsibly. Crypto fugitive Do Kwon has been sentenced to 4 months in prison in Montenegro for passport forgery. But a Montenegrin court says his extradition to South Korea or the U.S. will not come anytime soon. President Yoon Suk-yeol is in Paris and will make a speech to boost South Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in Busan. He'll also hold talks with his French counterparts. Our Oh Soo-young is traveling with the president.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is preparing to highlight South Korea's vision for the future, its promise and its commitment to giving back and standing in solidarity with the global community. That's according to the presidential office, a day before Yoon delivers a speech in Paris to boost South Korea's bid to host the World Expo 2030 in the port city of Busan. Along with K-pop stars like Psy and Aespa's Karina, the president on Tuesday will take part in a fourth bidding presentation at the General Assembly of the Bureau International des Expositions, the final chance for South Korea to make its case before the member states elect the host country in a secret ballot in November. The port city has focused on transforming our world, navigating towards a better future, with sub-themes being sustainable living with nature, technology for humanity, and a platform for caring and sharing. Busan is competing against Saudi Arabia's Riyadh, Italy's Rome, and Ukraine's Odessa to host the international fair. Touching down in the French capital on Monday, President Yoon first met with Korean nationals in Paris, calling on them to back Busan's bid for the World Expo. Also celebrating 137 years of relations between the two countries, Yoon further emphasized those citizens' role in building value-based cooperation between the two liberal democracies.
오늘날 한국과 프랑스는 자유, 인권, 법치의 보편적 가치를 공유하는 파트너입니다. 앞으로도 양국은 활발한 문화 인적 교류를 바탕으로 첨단 기술 분야와 글로벌 어젠다에서 협력을 강화해 나갈 것입니다.
To lay the groundwork for future collaboration, Yoon on Tuesday will also hold a dialogue with innovative minds at a startup campus, Station F.
So these universal values are important in dealing with the past, but also the present and for the future, giving the issues and the configuration of the world now, US-China, trade wars, all sorts of crises. There's a need based on these values to dialogue further, and that the dialogue could be brought by next generation.
President Yoon has said it's time to upgrade the relationship, which became a comprehensive partnership almost 20 years ago, to collaborate more extensively across urgent issue areas. His talks with President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday at the Elysee Palace will span North Korea, the war in Ukraine, to tech cooperation and economic security. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Paris.
Accompanying President Yoon Suk-yeol during his speech in Paris are K-pop stars and renowned leaders in academia. According to the president's spokesperson, Do Kwon, K-pop girl group Aespa's Karina will join virtually, along with star soprano and ambassador for Busan's bid to host the 2030 World Expo, Cho Soo-mi. Among the on-site speakers is singer Psy, who has helped spread K-pop and unite global citizens through it. Now Psy has a special connection with Paris, having performed his hit song Gangnam Style in front of a flash mob crowd in the French capital. The spokesperson added there'll be a few more experts who will speak while not revealing their identities. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Chinese leader Xi Jinping met in Beijing during a critical visit to Beijing. No tangible outcome, but both leaders did agree that the world needs stable U.S.-China relations. Our Choi Min-jung reports.
Washington and Beijing have both agreed on the need to stabilize their relationship. At a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping underlined the importance of progress being made through the secretary's visit.
Face-to-face interaction should always be based on mutual respect and sincerity. I hope that through this visit, Mr. Secretary, you will make more positive contributions to stabilizing China-U.S. relations.
Speaking at a press briefing after his meeting with Xi, Blinken said senior-level talks between the two sides must continue.
In every meeting, I stress that direct engagement and sustained communication at senior levels is the best way to responsibly manage our differences and ensure that competition does not veer into conflict. And I heard the same from my Chinese counterparts.
The secretary also called on Beijing to use its influence to press Pyongyang to put a stop to further provocations in the region. He insisted that China is in a unique position to encourage North Korea to act responsibly. However, it remains to be seen whether the two sides can resolve long-standing issues involving Taiwan, trade, and human rights. Despite the challenge, Blinken stressed that it is the responsibility of both countries to find a path forward, and it is in the interest of the world that they do so. The White House said Blinken had candid, substantive, and constructive conversations with the Chinese leader and called the talks a good step forward.
And what we want is competition, not conflict. We've been very clear about that. But again, I think it is a good step forward. We believe it's a good step forward for Secretary to have a constructive conversation with President Xi.
Although no major breakthrough was made, pundits hope that Blinken's visit could pave the way for more bilateral meetings, perhaps even a summit in the future between Biden and Xi. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Heated talks over Japan's Fukushima water release are ongoing here in South Korea. The government says it opposes instigating public anxiety with provocative expressions, apparently targeting the main opposition. Our Han Sang-woo reports.
Without referring to him by name, the South Korean government has asked the chairman of the main opposition, Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, to refrain from using expressions like nuclear wastewater to refer to the radioactive water Japan plans to start discharging from Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean this summer.
Choosing to use words like that stimulate excessive and unnecessary anxiety among the public, and the contraction in consumption that comes with it can inflict irreversible damage on fishermen and the fisheries industry as a whole.
Vice Minister of Oceans and Fisheries Song Sang-geun added during Monday's regular briefing on the Fukushima wastewater issue that recent news articles reporting that the contaminated water can reach the East Sea 5 to 7 months after being discharged is not true. His words were echoed by the head of Seoul National University's Research Institute of Oceanography, Jo Yang-gi.
Due to the large-scale circulation of seawater, it's estimated the radioactive water released from Fukushima will reach the waters of South Korea in about 10 years if it moves along the ocean currents.
But should the wastewater reach the coastal waters of Jeju in 7 months, as suggested by the Helmholtz Association of German Research Centers in Germany, Director Cho said that the concentration levels of the radioactive material there would be 1 trillionth of the levels found near the shores of Fukushima.
We're interpreting it as the near equivalent to the concentration levels of a drop of ink dropped into the Han River that is completely diluted after being dispersed underwater.
Data from the Korea Customs Service, meanwhile, showed that South Korean imports of Japanese seafood, in terms of amount, plunged by more than 30% last month compared to May of last year, likely in large part due to contamination concerns as the Fukushima wastewater release approaches. In response to such concerns, the government and the ruling People Power Party agreed during a policy consultation meeting on Sunday to increase the number of sites testing seawater radioactivity levels from the current 92 locations to 200. 한성우, Arirang News.
A record 110 million people worldwide have been displaced, with wars in Ukraine and Sudan forcing millions to flee their homes in search of safety. This is according to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Now, marking World Refugee Day, we're joined by Professor Stephanie Nouwen. Welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So, Stephanie, around 19 million people were forced to flee their homes just last year. That's the biggest annual jump on record. What pushed up the already devastating figures even higher?
There's some continuing conflicts like the war in Ukraine and the war in Syria that has continued to push people out of their country. Also, Afghanistan has destabilized. 20 years ago, people were returning to Afghanistan. Now they are having to flee again. In addition, there's displacements happening in Africa, East Africa and Central Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and areas around there that have seen an uptick in violence. Sudan, things have destabilized in Sudan, and so there's lots of new displacements that have happened, in addition to displacement happening in Venezuela. Most Venezuelans aren't given refugee status, at least not yet, but they are actually the largest population that's displaced outside of their home country.
Right, but the thing is, it's not just man-made conflicts that are forcing innocent people to flee and search for new homes. Natural disasters, because of climate change, are also making people refugees. What parts of the world are affected? Let's talk about that.
Certainly. So I think it's important to first note that people who are fleeing environmental disasters are not legally considered refugees. So refugee protection is only available for people who are being targeted for persecution for particular categories: their religion, their political opinion, their nationality. And so we have large numbers of people being displaced by environmental disasters, many related to climate change, but those people are not necessarily given the same legal protections that refugees are. But one of the problems we have right now is that a lot of the worst environmental disasters like flooding, like drought that's causing famine, those are happening in places that already see conflict that's displacing people. And sometimes it's happening in the places where refugees have fled to. So they've left their country because of violence, they go to a new country, and then they're faced with drought in that new country. And so the relationship between climate change and environmental catastrophes and refugees and displacement is really complicated. I think the important thing to note is that this is the same people that are being hurt by war and by persecution are also the most impacted by climate change disasters.
Right, Stephanie, thank you so much for clarifying the categories that the different refugees in different situations fall into. Now, we are also seeing some reluctance from countries around the world, right? Poland, for example, is refusing to take anyone from Muslim countries in the Middle East and also North Africa. How should this issue be taken care of then?
This is a worldwide problem. It's Eastern Europe has gotten a lot of attention recently with not wanting to accept Syrians. This was happening in Poland. This was happening in Hungary. But lots of countries, including the United States, has been very reluctant to take in new refugees. And so, this is it's an easy problem to solve in the sense that we know what refugees need. They need protection. They need rights of movement. It's just that these solutions are very politically unpopular. Leaders know what would solve the problem, but they don't want to do it because they feel like it's going to be very unpopular with their voting base, with their own supporters. And so it's really important for people who care about this issue to let their elected officials know that they are not against refugees, that they understand that refugees needing to be somewhere safe, to legally have the right to be in a place where they're not going to be subjected to violence, they're not going to be subjected to environmental disasters, is a human right. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes difficult to bring new people into your country, but it's important in these times when so many people around the world cannot live safely in their home country.
Right. I guess it can be quite touchy and sensitive, especially to politicians when they're trying to gain the popularity and support from their own people.
Absolutely. And, you know, refugees are inherently people who are different from, the native population. They are an unknown, they are strangers, but it's important to remember that they are very much like everybody else. They had regular lives, they have family, they had, some job or occupation that they use to sustain themselves. They are people who care about their community, who care about their loved ones, just like the rest of us.
Right.
And something very horrible happened in their country that upended their life. But if they're allowed to come into a new country and spend the time integrating there, they can have the same regular life that they used to have.
Right. All right, Stephanie, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
South Korean crypto fugitive Do Kwon has been sentenced to 4 months in prison in Montenegro for passport forgery. A Montenegro court on Monday handed down the sentence to the disgraced co-founder of Terraform Labs and one of his aides. They were arrested as they attempted to travel to Dubai with fake passports. They denied the charges during previous hearings. Earlier this month, the court granted bail to both on the condition that they each pay roughly $430,000. This comes as South Korea and the U.S. are both seeking Do Kwon's extradition. It's still unclear where he'll be extradited once he has completed his sentence. While with K-pop gaining huge popularity across the world, K-pop idols are also evolving, like this girl group Blackswan, with all 4 members having different nationalities, and none of them are South Korean. Our Kim Jung-sil has the story.
Meet the next generation K-pop girl group Blackswan.
안녕하세요, 블랙스완입니다.
Starting with leader Fatu, who's from Belgium, members Sriya, Envy, and Gabby come from India, the US, and Brazil. Even though none of the members were born in Korea, Blackswan got its training in Korea, and the members sing in Korean just like any other K-pop group. I asked them why they wanted to get into K-pop.
At that time when I was 15, I was going through a very hard time mental-wise. But while watching Shiny Sunbeam들, they gave me back a lot of happiness. And K-pop being that genre, I was like, you know what? If I could be able to do this for someone else who is going through the same thing I went through, that'd be amazing.
But it wasn't all a bed of roses on the road to becoming a group, especially the language gap.
There is so many ways to say the same thing that it was harder than I was expecting, the Korean, for sure. And training was also hard.
Other than like the physical and mental, I just felt it was very lonely sometimes, especially at the beginning because I didn't know much.
All their hard work didn't go unnoticed, as after Blackswan released its much-anticipated single, Karma, it hit 4.5 million views on YouTube in 1 month.
Okay, 1, 2, show me what you like.
and it was filmed in member Surya's hometown in India.
I was so glad that we were able to shoot in India, in Odisha, and we were able to show our culture, one of our cultures, dance.
Representing K-pop, but also their own countries, Blackswan hopes to become global pop artists using K-pop as a stepping stone. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the North Atlantic Ocean, where a major search and rescue operation is underway for a missing submersible that was taking tourists to the wreckage of the Titanic. Now, the U.S. Coast Guard said on Monday that contact was lost with the submersible 1 hour and 45 minutes into its dive the previous day. 5 people are on board the vessel, which reportedly carries enough oxygen in reserve to last up to 96 hours. Rescuers say that operations are challenging due to the remote search area. The trip to the underwater wreckage is part of an 8-day package offered by OceanGate Expeditions at $250,000 a seat. The Titanic sank 600 kilometers off the coast of Newfoundland after colliding with an iceberg in 1912 and lies 3,800 meters below the ocean's surface. An estimated 1,500 people were killed. Turning over now to the West Bank, at least 5 Palestinians have been killed and over 90 wounded amid fighting with Israeli military in the occupied West Bank. Over 20 of the wounded are in serious condition. Local media outlets report that the hours-long clash at the Jenin refugee camp on Monday came after Israeli soldiers entered the camp to arrest 2 suspects. The Israeli military said its forces were attacked during this raid and several Israeli soldiers were injured. Israeli military helicopter gunships were also used in the clash. It's the first time in decades that combat helicopters were used in the West Bank. Now, citizens of Switzerland have voted to pass a net zero climate law. The referendum on Sunday saw over 59% of voters back the government's plan to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy and reach zero emissions by 2050. Backers of the plan say it's necessary as the Alpine country will be hit hard by climate change and is already seeing the effects in the Alps. Last year, Swiss glaciers lost more than 6% of their volume. Scientists consider a loss of 2% to be extreme. The referendum was triggered after the bill was opposed by the right-wing Swiss People's Party. It argued that the bill would increase electricity prices as the country relies heavily on imported fossil fuels. And finally, people in Rome will soon be able to walk near the spot where Julius Caesar met his end. It comes as local authorities are set to open a new walkway on Tuesday at the Central Lago Argentina Square. According to historical accounts, the Roman dictator was stabbed to death there in 44 BC as part of a plot by a group of senators, including his friend Brutus. The ancient site also hosts 4 temples below the city's modern street level, all of which were only viewable from behind barriers. But that's set to change with the new ground-level walkway at the site that was discovered and excavated in the 1920s.
Good morning. On Monday, regions under heat advisory sweltered throughout the day under dazzling sunshine and into the night. The capital area was so close to having a tropical night and starts off the day at 24.7 degrees Celsius. This morning's gray skies are very welcomed with much hope for relief on the way this afternoon with some rain in the forecast. Skies remain partly sunny, then rain starts from Jeju, Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces in the the afternoon, gradually spreading nationwide overnight before letting up from tomorrow in the west. Afternoon highs will be 2 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday, hovering around the norms in most parts of the country. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all we have for this Tuesday morning. Thank you for watching our new day at Arirang.